Hi, thank you for joining me, Mindy Mandell here. So this video is going to continue with the elements of theology, and today I want to wrap up those propositions that Dodds put under the heading on procession and reversion. So we're looking at propositions 36 through 39. Now I am using the E.R. Dodds translation. For those of you who do not have the paper copy, you can find a link for a PDF version in the description box. And what we're looking at in this series of propositions are propositions dealing with this triadic relationship of remaining, proceeding, and reverting. And so proposition 35 showed us why we need all three and why it's complete when you have all three. However, even though we do use this triangle as a symbol for this triadic relationship, what we were seeing in many of the propositions that earlier in this section is this idea of a proceeding through a number of causes, and so running through a kind of circuit. And it's this circuit imagery that's going to be most helpful to us today. So the first proposition I'm going to look at today is proposition 36. And this one states, in all that multiplies itself by procession, those terms which arise first are more perfect than the second, and these than the next order, and so throughout the series. And here's how he explains it. For if procession is that which distinguishes product from cause, and there is a declination in secondaries relatively to primals. Let me pause there. Proposition 28 was the one that stated that like terms are created before unlike terms. And so when he's talking about a declination in secondaries, he means a declination in likeness in the secondaries relative to their cause, the primal. And so if procession is in this way, then the first terms in such processions are more closely conjoined with the causes, since they spring direct from them, and so throughout. So the ones closer to the cause are more like it. And that which is closer and more akin to the cause, then he's saying, is more perfect. For causes are always more perfect than effects. And so the monad at the very top of the series would be the most perfect. And those closest to it then are not only the ones that are more like it, but they're also more perfect. And so the more remote would be less perfect, as it loses the likeness of the cause. So we can think of it this way. The effects that are closest to the cause are the ones that are most like it and therefore most perfect, if you will. Whereas as the series unfolds, then you have those that are more unlike, but also then he's making a relationship here, a direct correlation between being like and being perfect. And so those that are more remote from the most perfect cause would be the ones that are more unlike and also least perfect. Okay, now we'll go on to proposition 37. The wording here makes it seem a bit confusing, but all he's really saying is that reversion is in the opposite direction from procession, and therefore instead of going from most perfect to least perfect, you're going in the opposite direction, from least perfect to most perfect. So proposition 37 reads, in all that is generated by reversion, the first terms are less perfect than the second, in these than the next order, and the last then would be the most perfect. So just going in the opposite direction. For if reversion is the return of a circuit, and that was proposition 33, and the goal of reversion is the source of procession, you're returning to the cause, or the first term, the monad, at the very top of the series, then if the procession is from the most perfect term, then the reversion would be towards the most perfect term. And if the last term of the procession, the last term is the first term of the reversion, going in the opposite way, and the least perfect term of the procession is its last, then the reversion begins from its least perfect term. In the order of reversion, then, the least perfect terms are first, and the most perfect are last. We might visualize it something like this, seeing that procession is that downward movement from the most perfect to the least perfect, whereas reversion is the return from the least perfect to the most perfect. Okay, Proposition 38. All that proceeds from a plurality of causes passes through as many terms in its reversion as in its procession, and all reversion is through the same terms as the corresponding procession. Okay, now this is actually something that we already inferred, and we already see that in our diagrams. I think one of the reasons that he needs to state this is simply to make sure that there are no holes, that it's stated directly so that he can plug any possible hole. For since both procession and reversion are accomplished through likeness, Proposition 29 dealt with likeness as a cause of procession, and Proposition 32 showed likeness as a cause of reversion. That which proceeds immediately from any principle is immediately reverted upon it, the likeness being immediate. But that which requires mediation in its procession requires it also in its reversion, since both moments must be related to the same term, and that was Proposition 34, so that it will revert first to the mean term, then to that superior to the mean. Accordingly, the well-being of each thing is derived through as many causes as its being, and conversely. Okay, I said he was just plugging up holes here, but there's actually another reason to have this proposition, and that is because it is going to set us up for Proposition 39. So the idea that some things will revert immediately after proceeding from a principle, whereas other things will require mediation. They will proceed further before reverting back, and they will go through as many causes as they proceeded through. And this sets us up for Proposition 39, which is going to introduce the triad of being, life, and intellect. And it's often translated different ways. Existence is sometimes used for being. Sometimes you'll see vitality instead of life. Here he's using knowledge, although I think that intellect is maybe a better word. But this triad is really key to Proclean metaphysics, and anyone who's familiar with Proclean metaphysics is familiar with this triad. It's used to describe each of the worlds, the intelligible world, the intellectual world, the psychical or world of soul, and so on. In the intelligible, where you have being, life, and intellect, you can then separate each one, make each one a triad of its own right, and each becomes a world of its own, and it gets quite convoluted. Here what he's doing is he's not giving us that detailed metaphysics. What he's doing is simply laying the groundwork for it by introducing this terminology. And he states, all that exists reverts either in respect of its existence only, or in respect of its life, or by the way of knowledge also. For either it has from its cause existence only, or it has life together with existence, or else it has received from thence a cognitive faculty also. In so far then as it has bare existence, we call its reversion existential. In so far as it also lives, we call that reversion vital reversion. And in so far as it has knowledge, likewise, we call that cognitive reversion. So we may depict this idea something like this. Some things may gain existence only and then quickly revert back to their cause. Other things will take on a vitality as well as existence, so they'll proceed a little further before reverting. Other things will also take on a cognitive faculty as well as vitality and existence, and so they will proceed even further before reverting through the same number of terms. And so what you see here then is he's introducing these terms and also the order of the terms. And so going back to the text, it ends by saying, for as it proceeds, so it reverts. And the measure of its reversion is determined by the measure of its procession. Some things, accordingly, have appetition in respect of bare existence only. That is, they have a fitness for the participation of their causes. Others have a vital appetition. That is, they have a movement towards the higher. And others again have a cognitive appetition, which is a consciousness of the goodness of their causes. So he's matching the appetition or the desire with the type of reversion. So that wraps up then our look at the propositions dealing with precession and reversion. And this will also be the last video of this year. But from next year then, we will pick it up from Proposition 40. I hope you will join me for those. I'm going to talk about the self-constituted. And we'll look at what is that anyway. So if you have any questions about the propositions we've looked at so far, there is an email address in the description box, or you can also leave a question in the comments section. And if you have any comments at all, feel free to leave those as well. So please like and subscribe, and I hope that you will join me in the new year, and I hope you all have a happy new year. Thank you very much.